Shaun Tomson, welcome. This is so cool. I am so grateful.
Good to be here.
Shaun, what an honor. Honest to goodness, what a cool, special honor for me to have you in here. Because it's so funny. I can close my eyes and go back as I'm a kid, and you were on the walls of my house, and we all had you and all of your peers on our walls. And so I'm now a 56-year-old version of that fanboy. So just know you do have a fanboy here. Growing up in the 70s, starting to surf, I was starting to surf around the time that you became a pipe master, a world champion. And part of this revolution in how waves are ridden and how barrels are ridden, which you were at the forefront of. People are going to go, how did Shoeline get Shaun Tomson in the studio? Like, how did this happen? Like, this clown. Do you remember how this happened? How we met the first time?
Yes.
It's a great story. It's, for me, you may not remember all the nuance of it, Shaun, but I'll never forget it because there's a funny story. So we met at the We Are Ocean event, the great fundraising event at Newport Aquatic Center. I was introduced to you by Bob Hurley, who's another one of my icons. So I got Bob Hurley introduced me to Shaun Tomson, like pinch me moment, okay, magic. But Shaun, he introduced me to you and he goes, Shaun Tomson, this is Mark Shoeline. And there was a little pause. You go, Mark, what's your last name? And I said, Shoeline. And there's another pause. And then you poked me in the chest and you said, Yid? And I've heard you talk about barrel riding, how it slows down. My brain slowed down and I go, Yid. I never heard that before. I'm like, Yid, Yiddish? Jewish, yes. I'm like, yes, Shaun, I'm a Yid. But I had never heard it before, and it made me giggle, and I'll never forget. And then a little while later, we had been talking, and my friend Dan Levine walked up, and I got to go, Shaun, this is Dan, a Yid. So Judaism is something that we have in common, and we can talk about as well. But I just want you to know, it cracks me up to think about it. But I was slow motion going, I don't know what that means. Oh, I think I know. So that's the Genesis story. Okay, super rad. Shaun, I've heard you talk beautifully about your parents and the impact of both of them and what they went through. Clearly, we're a long way from where you grew up. I'm going to turn it over. Can you talk about growing up, where you did, when you did, and how you were influenced? And let's start with the family, and then we're going to go down this is your life, Shaun Tomson. Is that cool?
Sure. So I grew up in a place called Durban, South Africa. Durban's a coastal city. At that time, it had a couple of million people. It was a good-sized city. It was the biggest harbor in South Africa at the time, so there was a lot of industry there. We also had an amazing surf, incredibly consistent. We had a series of jetties that ran along the beach that was exposed to south swells. So during wintertime, we used to get some pretty serious waves. It was kind of like, I suppose, almost like Kira back in the day, but very, very, very consistent. Wasn't as perfect, but maybe stronger, a little bit more challenging, a little bit more volatile than like that perfect wave of Kira. So I grew up with a very, very consistent surf right in front of our home. My father and mother were both beach people. They were both survivors. My mom was living on the island of Malta during the Second World War. Her father was an engineer, worked for the British Navy, and they lived right next door to a big seaport. So when war was declared in 1939, the first thing that the Italians and Germans did is they wanted to bomb this strategic seaport. So my mom endured 3,600 air raids from the Luftwaffe and the Aeronautica, the Italian Air Force, and for a number of years lived in underground shelters. They had these caves that had been tunneled into the cliff and had 2 direct hits on their home while they were in it, but miraculously survived. So when my mom was 8, so that was from about 8 to 11, she endured a lot of hardship. And eventually the whole island was under siege and started to starve, so they evacuated her to Alexandria in Egypt, and then ultimately she came down the east coast of Africa and ended up in Durban. And they were on the way back to England with her brother and her mom, and they decided, no, this is the place for us. Beautiful weather and that beautiful Indian Ocean. So that's how my mom ended up in South Africa. She was actually born in England, in Plymouth. And then my father, his parents came from the pogroms in Russia. They were of Latvian extraction. And at that time, there was a great deal of anti-Semitism in Russia. So along with many other people that fled Lithuania and Latvia, they ended up in South Africa, a lot of Jews. It was that classic immigrant story. My grandfather came there with nothing, eventually built up, made some successful businesses, invested in a lot of property. And so I came from, by the time my dad was born, they were relatively affluent. And my father was a champion swimmer in his youth. And his dream was to win an Olympic gold medal. His hero was Duke Hanamurku. And my dad was a surfer as well. Back in those days, he used to ride these little wooden boards. So he volunteered for the Second World War. In those days, you didn't have to, there was no conscription. It was, South Africa was part of the British Commonwealth. But he didn't have to fight, but he volunteered, and he ended up in the South African Air Force. And ironically, he was flying American bombers. They were called Martin Marauders, B-26s. He was bombing the same Italians and Germans that were bombing my mom in Malta, like some twist of irony. And then after the war was over, he came back to South Africa and resumed his swimming career. And the London Olympics were coming up. And he was like South African junior swimming champion in the 50 and 100. And then he was out surfing on his little wooden board at one of the local beaches. And he was very badly attacked by a shark. Shark came up underneath him and hit him. And I found this newspaper article that he'd written. He said, "It lifted me clear from the water. It was an ideal day for surfing and for sharks." He wrote a whole article about it, front page article. And it savaged his arm. It ripped his arm apart, his right arm, from the shoulder all the way down to the wrist. And that was the end of his swimming career in one bite. But he had my dad had a great outlook on life. He had a great sense of humor. When I was a bit older and kind of came to realize what had happened to him, and I said to him, Daddy, what happened? He said, the shark bit me, and there's blood all around me, and all my friends deserted me, and then this black fin started to circle me. I said, Daddy, what happened to the shark? He said, I was really lucky. After biting me, it just died of blood poisoning. That's how he looked at life, with a great sense of humor. But, he never lost his love for the ocean. He never lost his passion for surfing. And I think he imparted it to me. He would point out what was dangerous in the ocean, the riptides and the sharks, and the blue bottles were like man o' war that would come down every northeaster when it would blow in summertime. So, yes, he made me aware of the dangers, but he made me aware of how amazing the ocean is. So the beach was part of our life. My mom and dad met, fell in love, and the beach was part of our life. Every weekend we'd be out at the beach. My mom would bring a big hamper down there, and the kids would just hang out on the beach, and we just got into a progression from swimming, because I became a good swimmer, into body surfing. We loved body surfing, and then we used to ride these, we called them lilos. It was like a blown-up rubber mat. We used to bomb in there, my brother Paul, my cousin Michael, and my dad, taught us all that. And then we graduated onto these little mini boards. They're like 4'6", little teeny boards that we first started standing on. And then the first time I stood up, man, that was it. It just gripped me, that feeling of exhilaration, that stoke, when suddenly you're up on that board and you just see the world differently. You have that different perspective, and it just grabbed me instantly and instantaneously. And that was it. And from then on, I just wanted to surf.
Well, let me ask you a question. Thank you for that. Two questions. One, I've heard you, Michael Tomson, your cousin, also very prolific in the surf world for decades. Did your brother, Paul, get into it like you guys did?
Yeah, my brother Paul was fully into it. He was younger. He was a few years younger than me. So, when you're young, that sort of 2 years is quite two and a half years is quite a big gap. But he was really committed and good. He was never so focused on competition like Michael and I. Michael and I also, we competed against each other very, very strongly. Michael, every day after school, if the surf was good, my dad he built this beach buggy. They had like a big metal shop. And he built this first beach buggy in South Africa out of handmade out of metal. And he, with our boards on top. And if the surf was good, he'd pick me up and my brother. And then he'd go and pick Michael up. Michael was at a different school. And then he'd take us to the beach. Only if the surf was good. Otherwise, then it was bus home. So Michael would stay at our place every single weekend. Every surf trip, Mike would come with us. Every surf competition, Mike would compete. I think Mike saw more of my father than his father during the week and during the vacation time. So you know, very close, very competitive. And I think that's one of the reasons I became good, I think, was I had that competition with Mike, and it was intense. You know, like who could catch the most waves on the session, or you know, it was it was friendly, but it was intense, and you know, carried right the way through our careers, all the way to when he was competing on the Pro Tour. Actually, in 1976, the first year of the Pro Tour, Michael came 5th. I was 6th. I was at university that year, trying to compete at the same time, and then all the way through to 1978, he said, "Hey, Shaun, I'm going to go off the tour. I'm going to start a new company. I'm going to call it Gotcha." I mean, what? Mark's starting a company. I'm going to start a company too. And the following year, in '79, I started Instinct. So you know, we competed
like parallel paths.
Parallel paths, absolutely. You know, we were both at university together. He was a couple of years ahead of me because he was a year older, and also I had to go to the army. Mike didn't go to the army, and then left South Africa. You know, before they caught him.
But hold on. So you guys were both on tour. We're jumping ahead a little bit, but you're both on tour, and he goes, "Hey, I'm gonna go start Gotcha." Yeah. Which we all grew up, again, another one of the major brands for decades. And that's what influenced you, that competitiveness to go, if you are, I am.
Absolutely, because I at the time, I'd had this logo on my board that my father was my first picture in the newspaper in South Africa. Well, first big picture in the newspaper, a water shot of me surfing. And my dad loved the picture, and he had an artist friend of his create sort of a stylized rendition of it, and a logo. And he said, "Son, this is going to go on every single one of your boards." My dad was like a branding marketing guy. I mean, my father started the world's first professional surfing contest, which is still running today in South Africa, 1969. The first, you know, Bell's Beach has been running longer. Bell's Beach didn't have prize money before the contest that my dad started. It was called the Durban 500, became the Gunston 500. Now it's called the Ballito Bay Pro. So, you know, he was very into like business marketing. So he said, "Son, this logo is going to go on every single one of your boards." And it was a beautiful logo. And I said, "No, Daddy, it's like too big." And he said, "This is the deal. I pay for the boards. Logo on the boards, or I don't buy the boards." A bit of tough love.
That's an easy plan.
Yeah,
right
so
there.
I had this logo on my board, and you know, I started to hit it pretty hard, and started to win a lot of contests, and started to do well in Hawaii. And this logo became very famous. It was on the covers of all the magazines. And before I started Instinct, so I had a logo that was on all my boards. And then when Mike started Gotcha, I'm going, wow. Well, I got a logo. All I need now is a name. And I'm going like, what's the best part of surfing for me? Like, what am I most known for? And what's the best? You ask any surfer, what's the best part of surfing? And they'll say tube riding. And, you know, I had developed kind of a whole new style and a whole new technique for riding inside the tube, driving and carving, as opposed to, you know, the Jerry Lopez shoot that arrow straight. Beautiful, beautiful, magnificent style. Very like a swami of style. But my approach was more radical, more carving. You know, how can I really explore riding on the foam ball? How can I explore turning and driving and, you know, trying to exit through the front, trying to exit through the wave. It was just a different approach. And like, well, when I feel that state, how do I feel? And I feel, well, I'm operating on instinct. So I thought, wow, it's such a natural name. And I said, when I'm in that state of flow, This was before they'd even written about flow, before Miha Csikszentmihalyi, this famous Hungarian psychologist who I met a number of times. I actually spoke with him at some conferences, psychology conferences about flow. And I said, that is the state, it's called the inner rhythm. And I felt that I could just connect my heartbeat with the beat of the wave, that rhythm, that beautiful flow, and that rhythmical control aspect where you feel that you can bend time and space. And I felt that I could curve that wall to my will. It was an amazing moment of what today's psychologists call flow, that optimal human experience. So it all came together in a very organic way. It came together with no bullshit, no marketing bullshit. Like so much of the industry today is just built on marketing bullshit. This is pure, just like when Mark started Gotcha, it was pure. We both came from that pure place, I think, authentic, hardcore surfers, like we put our lives on the line.
Shaun, let me jump in right there, because I think that's the question I have is, you mentioned your parents are survivors, and I've heard you talk about the stories that you just shared, the shark attack, Malta with your mom, dad being in the military, you going on to the military. Like, what did you get? And then this pure state that you and Michael and this competitiveness, like, did that come from your parents? Like, was that something that you learned? Was it osmosis, or do you think it was something you and Michael or you picked up on your, like, I'm guessing there must have been some big influence and impact of your folks on how you've lived your life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my father and mother, their sense of hope, their sense of positivity, their sense of optimism, honor. Honor was very, very important to my father. He would say, son, there's nothing in life worse than a sportsman that cheats. Like sport was honor to him. And, Duke Kahanamoku was his hero, became my hero. And, Duke represented aloha and represented what was good in surfing, kindness and empathy and sharing. And from my mom, I think I got principles of faith. How important it is to, she'd drag us along to shul every Friday night and Saturday mornings, and made sure that, my brother and I, who had our bar mitzvahs, and, faith, even though I think today in today's society, there's been a lot of people that have turned away from faith, I think faith is more important than ever. And when I say faith, it doesn't mean Jew, Catholic, Christian, Muslim. It's just this connectivity to a larger power, and this humility and this feeling of respect, responsibility, tolerance. These are things that the world has been losing over the last number of years. There's this tolerance, this trying to subjugate the truth to fit a narrative, surfing gave me great values. I wrote that little Surfers Code card so many years ago, and 12 lines: values, honor, integrity, commitment, respect, courage, empathy. These are important values, and I think certainly I got that from my mom and dad, and certainly I think from to a certain extent from education, from school, from university, from reading. I mean, I was a voracious reader, still am. So a lot of these. I was lucky. I had a lot of good influences. And you must remember then, there was a lot of negativity in surfing. There was a lot of dope. And there was this glorification of the drug culture. And it was initially, it was a very big issue in surfing. And yes, you had this kind of freewheeling freedom lifestyle, which I was super involved with. But for me, it was easy just to say no to dope and still, try to recreate a portion of this lifestyle into a spin-off that was going to come professional surfing without negatively impacting like the soul and culture and spirit of surfing. And I always thought that those two could exist perfectly symbiotically. you can have this freedom lifestyle, and then you can have the professional aspect. Because the reason for being is the stoke. The reason for being, for me, was never the win. Yeah, the win was important. But the reason for being was the stoke. And like, man, years ago, I connected with Shane Dorian. I was involved in this movie called In God's Hands. He said, I've never met anyone who's as surf obsessed as you. And I said, sure. My days were 10 years ago. You should have seen me then. And Kelly said the same thing to me. Shaun, I've never met someone who... And I went, I was an obsessed surfer. When I was on the tour, I won my first pro surfing event in 1973. I retired in 1989. No one on this planet, no one surfed more than me. There was no one spent more time in the water. And I never, ever, not even once, did it to practice. I did it because I loved it, because that was who I was. And every wave, I wanted to surf it better than the last one. I wanted to be as good as I could be. And, surfing gave me that sort of passion, that single-minded focus. It was pure.
It's really beautiful. And I think if you've spent enough time thinking, or in the surf world, you've heard of these times where like Jerry Lopez would go out at G-Land and surf for 8 hours. But you'd also hear that like during your peak, and I've heard you talk about it, you're like, I'd go do 8 hours out at Backdoor and like every day, nonstop. But I've heard you say that numerous times. I've heard other people say the same thing. Nobody surfed more than Shaun during that time.
I just loved it. I loved experimenting with boards and working with shapers. I did this. I did a list the other day of the shapers that I've worked with. When I say worked with, these are guys that I've gone and said, listen, this is what I need, or I've been in the shaping bay with them. 42 guys. I've worked with more shapers than any other surfer on this planet, all the way from my early days in South Africa, Max Wetland, Spider Murphy, all the way to Al and Rusty. First pro that Al ever shaped a board for was me. First twin fin he ever shaped was for me. So it's been so fun to have this kind of creative connectivity to these amazing shapers. It's not like, there's been so much this sort of design evolution of surfboards has been like mind-blowing. And I was so thankful that I lived through all these amazing eras of revolution, from the shortboard revolution in 1967 to the
twin fins and thrusters.
Yeah, the twin fins, thrusters, single concaves, double concaves. It's been amazing to have watched it and been a part of it. I think first thruster Simon ever shaped, other than a pro, other than for himself, was for me. So I've been right there in the thick of it with boards. So it's been
Shaun,
an amazing ride. That.
But even more than that, you've been in the middle of all of the evolution of the changing professional surfing, changing of boards, all the equipment. Professionalism has changed significantly. Monetization has changed radically, and it's peaks and valleys, right? And we were even talking offline earlier about the industry, and you mentioned some of it. There's so many parts of this, and trust me, we're going to get to, but I have a couple questions still going back a little bit further. You mentioned Duke, and he was your dad's idol, and it was yours as well. I believe did your father meet Duke?
So my father met the whole family. After his shark attack, his father flew him to San Francisco for hand surgery. It's supposedly the best hand surgeon. And then he flew to Hawaii to recuperate. And he stayed in the Royal. In those days, there was only 2 hotels on the beach, the Royal Hawaiian and the Moana on Waikiki. And he met the whole Kahanamoku crew there. There's a whole lot of them. Sergeant Shriver, you told me there was
I would imagine
half a dozen of them.
He was his idol, but also your father was a very competitive swimmer, and at the time, Duke was
the guy. Well, Duke was sort of earlier than my father. Duke was actually born on the 24th of August, 1890. 24th of August when Mike Thompson was born, and my son Luke Thompson was born on the 24th of August. So he was like a generation before my father, because my father was born in 1923. So he was like 23 years older than my dad. But, when he went over there, to Hawaii. And now here you think he's like 23 years old, his swimming career's done. And I can imagine him, meeting these wonderful people and him falling in love with Hawaii. And he came back with this amazing love for Hawaii. We were the only home in Durban, in my town, where you had to leave your shoes outside. For like my dad's like adopted the Hawaiian. But for my bar mitzvah, my dad took me to Hawaii. All my friends, got stocks and money. My dad takes me to Hawaii. And this is 1969, ride the massive surf there. That was the view, and Greg Knoll got the big waves. We stayed right there on the point at Makaha during this, like the biggest season ever.
There's a rumor that you saw that wave.
Yeah, we were there, we watched that wave. We got movies of the apartment was right there. And this Australian guy actually filmed it as well, a guy called L.B. Felsen, who filmed Morning of the Earth. He was staying with us. He came over there to stay with us, and he filmed me in a lot of
I thought there was no footage of that wave.
Yeah, that's
Greg's.
what they say. But
is it truly as big as they said?
It was a big wave for the time. It was like the biggest. Certainly was the biggest wave. But my dad. Okay, so now he's back in Hawaii, 1969. Loved Hawaii. Met everyone. Everyone loved my dad. And now, he decides he's going to have this surfing contest. So what he does is he wants to bring every year. He wants to bring a famous surfer to come so it can elevate the standard of South African surfing. So the first year he brings Midget Farrelly, the second year he brings Midget Farrelly back again. Also, because my father has rescued the biggest surfboard manufacturer in South Africa from bankruptcy, he's become a partner now, and they're making Midget boards under license. So my dad's always, he's got a bit of an ulterior motive. So brings Midget out there twice, and then he goes, well, I want to bring out Hawaiian surfer. So he decides he's going to bring out Eddie Aikau. So he brings Eddie Aikau out from Hawaii. Eddie comes to check into the hotel that he's reserved for him. It's one of the big hotels on the beach called the Malibu Hotel, ironically. The manager says, no, you black, you can't stay here, because this was the era of segregation, of apartheid in South Africa. It's legalized discrimination. It was called apartheid. Well, when I say legalized, it was like the Jim Crow laws in the late 50s and 60s in the United States. So now Eddie can't get into his hotel, like discrimination as he pretty much gets off the plane. So my dad hears about it. So we drive down a little beach buggy. We go and pick up Eddie, and Eddie comes and stays with us. No way. And I would take Eddie surfing every morning, and it was really the first time that I saw apartheid, discrimination, segregation through the eyes of someone else, because I was like 15 or 16. And it really impacted me, and I could see how much it impacted Eddie. And then we introduced him to this wonderful Australian couple, the Holmes family, and they took him to J Bay after the contest was over. Eddie got knocked out pretty early because surf was small and crappy. And I think that Eddie never forgot that aloha that the Tomson family showed him, and the Holmes family showed him, these Australians, so that when the beef started to happen during the busting down the door era, and Rabbit and Ian Cairns were all on the hot seat, Eddie was the peacemaker, and I think remembered the aloha that he'd gotten. There's an amazing connectivity in surfing that lies beneath the surface of the water that people don't even know about, these amazing connections. So that's the way I like to think that he saw this and saw that he needed to step in because of the aloha that he'd been shown. So
that's an amazing, I almost feel like that's a missing puzzle piece, because I think those of us, if you've watched the movie or read the book about that generation of you guys on the North Shore, and when this whole thing went down with Rabbit and Ian, and you seem to stay out of the fray a little bit. We'll get to that generation and busting down the door. But I always wonder, well, why did they come to the Hawaiians and Eddie that came to kind of step in? Why? Was it just aloha, or was there something more? And it sounds like there was maybe this extra connectivity.
I think it was both. I think it was aloha, and also an idea that, one day this professional surfing might benefit everyone. It's not just going to benefit the Australians, the South Africans, but it will benefit Hawaii too. So I think that, maybe there was two motives. at play, but certainly, the aloha and the goodness and the goodwill was very strong.
Wow. Shaun, my favorite thing to do with these discussions is kind of connecting the dots. So like finding these little pieces. Let me ask you this. Your dad, you were a beach family, and dad was surfing before you were born, and that's when the shark happened. He was a swimmer. So you were a beach family by design or by nature. But kind of the sliding doors of your dad's life, like, as you said, like he rescued the board company, and then he was bringing people in, and like, could any of your surfing career happen without your dad's support, passion, belief in it? Could you?
No, it definitely wouldn't. It wouldn't have happened. I was lucky that my father had, he had the financial resources to send me to Hawaii. I mean, I started to go to Hawaii every year. So I was very lucky. I was very lucky that I had a very positive role model. I was very lucky that I had a father who was willing to let me go on my own path. My father never directed me. He would give me his opinion, and then he would let me have the responsibility. He was never out there. Like I see parents out there with flags and whistles and directing their children and, hoping they're going to become a pro surfer today. That's the absolute worst thing that a parent could do. The parent needs to just educate, inform, empower, as opposed to direct. The kid's the director. Like if I lost the heat, there was only one person to blame. That was me. And I think when a parent gets in the way and a kid goes, it was your fault, you told me to go, you take that board out, or you told me to sit over there, or you told me to get the first wave of the set, whatever it is. The parents need to empower, enrich, educate, but not direct. So I was very lucky that I had a dad like that. And then, he always, I think from an early day, always put the philosophy of winning into perspective. That winning wasn't everything. Winning was very important, but it wasn't everything. In fact, the first pro contest I won, big one. So this was it was called the Gunston 500. It was the biggest sporting event in South Africa. It was part of the tour, before the tour even started.
This is the event that your father started.
And it's the event my father started. So 1973, I'm doing my military service. My commandant's given me a couple of weeks off to compete.
Were they pretty supportive of your surfing career while you were in the military?
Yeah, they were because I was
national treasure.
I was like they called it a springbok. I'd represented my country. I'd been and competed in the World Championships when I was 14 at Bells Beach against all the famous surfers of the world, Nat Young, Midget Farry, David Nueva. And so now I'm on leave. The final is on. It's pretty small surf, but I feel I've done really well. And I'm up on the podium. In those days, there was no instantaneous scoring. They like to dramatize it. So there's 6 finalists on the podium, and there's 30,000 people there. It was the biggest surfing event in the world at the time. Just massive. It was one of the biggest sporting events in South Africa at the time, in the country, because the country was relatively isolated because of apartheid. So now I look up at my dad. They had this huge tower on the beach, like an administrative tower where the judges sat and, all this stuff kind of happened. And he's up on the tower. So now I know my father knows the results. So I look up at him and I go, hey, Dad, while I'm on the podium, how have I done, And he gives me the thumbs down. Dad gives me the thumbs down. I go, oh, no. Because I thought I was first or second. And then they started announcing around 6th, 5th, 4th, and winning, Shaun Tomson. And I walk up there and I look at my dad. My dad's hysterical with laughter, laughing away. And, for a young guy, it was a good moment to obviously win for the first time.
Well, you were 17?
17, yeah.
I think I say it all the time in here, Shaun. At 17, I don't know if I could make a sandwich. And here we are winning the biggest contest in the world. It's incredible.
It was a big one. So, he I think in his own way, he showed me that winning was important, but it wasn't everything. And Dad can make a joke about it. So I used to turn the tables on him, if I won a big comp when I was in Hawaii, how'd you go? Oh, I did okay. Well, where'd you come first? So I would
How fun. What a cool.
So we had a lot of we had a lot of fun with my wins. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier sportsmanship and your dad and that. Like, how did that come into play? I've heard you talk about this before, but what's your position on judging and the game of surf, or the profession of surf, when it comes to that?
You know, he would say to me, never complain about a judge's decision. He said, it's set in stone. Do not complain about a judge's decision. It's set in stone. Because you can cry, you can humiliate yourself, you can scream and shout, you can break your board in front of people. That it will not change the result. Just move on. So for me, I would never dwell. I would never get despairing. Yeah, I'd be bummed out, but you kind of rationalize it. But you move forward. You know, you can't let that loss, even the sting, you can't let it stay with you, and you can't complain about it, because it's not gonna get you anywhere.
So sorry, go on.
And then, you know, I would try to, you know, after a heat, you know, whether you won or lost, you go and congratulate your competitor. You know, squeeze the hand, look in the eye, and you know, I'm coming back. And I had this one. I've had a few really funny incidents with that. So I'm competing in Australia. It was then the richest event in the world. It was called the 2SM Coke Surfabout at North Narrabeen. And Marco Kalupo suddenly burst on the scene. It's like 1984. Suddenly there's this young 17, 18-year-old kid from Cronulla who's just like blowing up. And like I come up against him in 3-foot lefts. Like for me, the worst wave for me is a 3-foot left-hander against a 17-year-old that
goofy foot,
half my way, goofy
right,
footer.
yeah.
That's just like the raging bull. So go to my heat. It's a super close one. And, you know, everyone thinks, oh, Oki's won. And in those days, they called it a split decision. It was a 3-2 decision. 3 judges going my way, 2 judges going his way. It was different. And I see Oki on the beach, and I walk up to him afterwards, and he's crying, you know. Hey, I never cried after a heat. Never, ever. That's just different. And I walked up to him, and I was crying, and I remember I put my arm around him, and I went, hey, you know, like I feel like I'm a dad. But, hey, Oki, don't worry, there's going to be a lot more chances for you. And then someone captured a picture of it, and they published it in like Tracks magazine. But, you know, I tried to, throughout my career, I tried to uplift young guys as well. You know, you didn't want to, you know, no matter who it was that was coming up underneath me, I respected them. Martin Potter, Tom Carroll, Tom Curran, Marco Kalupo, Barton Lynch. In fact, I sponsored Tom Carroll with Instinct to 2 world titles, 1984-95. In fact, in 1985, I led the tour the whole year, and he beat me in the last event. And we were 1 and 2, and then he went on to sign with Quicksilver. Barton Lynch was sponsored to a world title in 1988. So, and then we had a great surf team, and I like to think that I helped those guys on their run. I helped those guys, you know, maybe they agree, maybe they disagree, but certainly it was a good process to be able to help and inspire and empower young guys. I love it, and I do that today with millions.
I was just going to say, and you haven't stopped, right? Where does that come from?
My dad was a kind guy. He was so kind on the beach. If a guy didn't have a board, my dad would buy him a board. Or I had this guy, Craig Sims, who was top South African pro. He said, Shaun, he's now a professor in Bond University in Australia. And he said, you know, I came out of the water and I was walking with my mom. And your dad walked up to me. He said, you know, you will represent South Africa as a surfer. And he said it was the furthest thing from his mind, but it gave him the motivation. And ultimately he did. He said, and without your dad, I wouldn't have had that motivation. I mean, so many young surfers he helped. And on our beach, that we grew up in this amazing beach called the Bay of Plenty. We'd say east or west bay is best. And it was just this incredibly consistent wave. You know, he made sure that us young guys stayed away from the dope scene. You know, the guys who were like smoking dope and doing whatever they did, used to call them the drug squad. No drug squad on this beach. So, you know, we had a father my father was very kind, and I think I just took after him because I saw the impact of kindness that he had on the beach, and I like to think, you know, when you're kind and when you give, who's the real recipient? You are, because in terms of the spiritual fulfillment and the warmth it gives to your soul, yeah.
Well, it's amazing, and we'll get back to it in a bit, but I think of your code, and you mentioned Duke, you know, Duke's creed and your code are very similar in how they look at the world, which is looking out for everybody else and how you live your best life and what that brings to others and yourself. So there's definitely something there.
Absolutely.
Which is really, really
absolutely.
Cool. Let me ask you this, Shaun. So we're talking about the world stage now. You're surfing. The names you're dropping are the best in the world. I think everybody you mentioned has been a world champion. You've been a world champ. How was it when you were at the peak of your powers? You win the Pipe Masters, which is the most iconic event in surfing. And you go on and you win the world title. And when you were growing up, there was no such thing as a world title.
No, it wasn't.
But before we get to that, you're growing up, it wasn't a thing. Your dad creates this contest. Did you see where this might be going? Because I'm wondering, what was the catalyst for you to continue to pursue surfing to such a level when it wasn't a money-making endeavor at that time, unless you saw that there really was something in the works? Like, what was the motivation at that time?
No, I didn't see I didn't see that there would ever be the financial opportunity or lifestyle opportunity in surfing. You know, for me, it was something I was going to do while I was young. You know, I was at university. I was at university in 1974, 1976. You know, I was studying economics and business finance. I was going to be a lawyer or an accountant. I mean, I was studying
good Jewish career.
Yeah,
right?
Introduction to Roman Dutch law. I mean, I was studying, you know, pre-law. So I'm standing. This is 1975. I won the Pipeline Masters that year.
Incredible.
Rabbit is I'm like 20. Rabbit, Bartholomew and I. This was featured in a film called Free Ride, which was an iconic movie at the time. Very, very famous movie. And in fact, you know, you spoke about surfing culture and the connectivity that people all around the world, especially in California, had to surf culture. And it came through the magazines, yes, but primarily the movies. The movies, when you watched Robert Bartholomew or Jerry Lopez or Mark Richards in those movies, those frames were just burnt into your brain. So I'm standing on the beach with Rabbit. Surf's 12 to 15. There's no one out at Pipe. We're watching Pipe. We were about to have a go. Because Rabbit and I also, we were big competitors, rivals. We loved each other, but we were gnarly rivals. And so I said, hey, Bugs, so what are you going to do? It's the end of the season now because, you know, I'm going home, he's going home. And he says to me, hey, mate, I'm going to be a pro surfer. I'm going to be a pro surfer, mate. I go, what? Pro surfer. And that kind of, for me, was the first inkling of, wow, there could maybe be something here. And the next year, 76 happened and professional surfing just like came into being. And yes, we were the front runners and we were the guys that sort of built it from the dream. But Rabbit, he was a real visionary, you know. He was, he had this beautiful, thoughtful way. So he was very instrumental, I think, in it. And there was this collectiveness that together we can make it happen. Ian Cairns, Peter Townend, Mike Thompson, Rabbit, Mark Richards, and then there was the Hawaiian crew. You we had these amazing surfers. Rena Abelera was incredible. Barry Kanai-Puni. Jeff Hackman was like a god. Jerry Lopez. Jerry was never really so much into the pro thing.
No, but he just owned Pipeline.
Pipeline was.
And you said Jeff Hackman, Mr. Sunset, Mr. Pipeline. We had all these.
Yeah, we had these guys that we competed hard against.
For
they
sure.
were the top dogs, and we wanted to give them a go. So it was a very special period, and then it like came into being, 1976. It happened, and what they did is right at the end of the year, they decided to, we're going to have a world championship. We're going to count back to these different events around the world, and then there's 2 more events to run. And I was at university trying to scratch over to get over there in time. And 1976 happened, and PT was a world champ. And then 77 was the first touring year with the first event at Burley Heads, and that was the event. That was the year that
who won
I won in
year?
77, yeah.
So amazing. And again, as a kid, that's right at the time when I was getting into it. I wasn't even surfing yet. In 77, I was 8 years old. But I started the next year. But like we were already into the magazines, and yeah, I mean, I've known you most of my life, buddy. Yeah, it's really incredible. And all the names and all the stories, if people surf and if they're in my era, like we grew up watching all this. And I mean, again, the movie, which we'll get to, is incredible because that is who you guys were the guys we looked up to and watched and, wanted to surf like and wanted to be like. And it's just an amazing story of a creation of an industry and a professional lifestyle that didn't exist when you started. Because the thing people need to recognize, and I'm recognizing, is you were in the military and then you're in university while you're competing on the world stage. Like, it's not like today where like they're bred. I just listened to a podcast with a local top pro in the world. He's like, I didn't even graduate high school. I just went pure, unadulterated pro surf. And your parents would say, hey, you can surf all you want, but you're going to go to school. I'm guessing that's what they did, right?
Yeah, I always had that. I think that commitment, and I found that you have to have varied interests if you want to have, I think, a long career. And for me, education and my other activities really help keep my surfing fresh. A lot of people go, Kelly Slater, how's he done it for so long? Kelly's had an incredible, varied level of interest. He's like a scratch golfer, created all these wave pools, got his own apparel company.
Of brands, yeah.
I mean, he's got sunblock brand. He's really maintained a lot of interests. So surfing is, yes, he's obsessed with surfing, just like I was obsessed with surfing, but he has other things happening as well. And I think for that reason, it makes your time in the water even more precious. And it just gives you, I think, an expansive edge. You have this sort of expanse, like I had this expansive learning. And I think it just made me a better competitor in the water. It made me, I think, a little bit more thoughtful in my approach. And like, I meet a lot of young surfers. And some of them are absolutely dismissive of education. And I go, hey guys, I've got this little method here. You should try it, spend 15 minutes. Can't even get them to spend 15 minutes. And I look and I go, the difference between a successful guy and an unsuccessful guy is successful guy will look and listen and learn from people that have achieved. I won 19 major pro events. I have a degree in economics, business finance. I have a Master of Science in Leadership. I've lectured to the world's biggest, best corporations. I lectured at Harvard, at Kellogg. They listen to me. But I tell you who doesn't listen to me? Young pro surfers. And I'm going, my advice is free. All it needs is 15 minutes. Guys walk past me, I'm in the Indies to say, I want to, I'm surfing in this. I'm going, try this, 15 minutes. And you know how I'm going to know if you tried it? Send it to me. Crickets. I'm going, this is a guy who's guaranteed to be unsuccessful. When I worked with a pro surfer, when I say worked with him, sometimes I'll just outreach to a guy who I think has terrific talent. I call it mind state, but doesn't have the right mind state. And I go, do this little exercise. It's not for me. It's for you. Millions of people have done it, and they've had great success with it. It's changed their lives. 15 minutes, 12 lines. Every line begins with I will. It's called writing your code. It's not my code. It's your code. You collectivize your power. You find your power, find your purpose, and you use this to improve your performance and improve your life. 12 lines, every line begins. Just 12 minutes, that's all you need. So this Hawaiian guy, I loved the way he surfed. Power. He was like a young Dane Kealoha. Tats, looked like a warrior. So I sent him an email on the CT a number of years back. 25th, 25th, 25th. Get 325th. That's last place in a row. I go, try this. I said, send it to me. He tries it. He sends it to me. I'll be successful. I'll be proud of my... He writes 12 beautiful lines. The very next event, he flies to South Africa, competes in the event my dad started. It's now called the Bleed Up. He gets a third. And wow, 25th to third. The next event, he wins. The end of the year, he wins the World Cup, an event that I won to win the... I'm going, wow, how good is that? Simple process. The letters I get from people, from whether it's an athlete, people, cancer survivors, people who've had grief, that people in large corporations. I had a guy say, Shaun, I want you to come and talk at my business. Australian guy, his name was Simon Anderson. Aussie, he's Aussie too. So I go down to San Diego.
The same Simon Anderson?
No,
or
different Simon.
Okay,
Different Simon. So I go down, I know you're getting a bit off kilter, but anyway, good. I go down to San Diego, and he's got a big crowd, about 500 people, and everyone's carrying around unicorns. So I go, well, why are you guys carrying around you? Company just hit $1 billion valuation. And wow, 7 years old. It's pretty gnarly growth. You know, Entrepreneur of the Year awarded by Ernst & Young, and you know,
big,
unbelievable compound growth through the 7-year run. Anyway, he stands up to introduce me. He goes, I met Shaun Tomson 7 years ago. He gave a talk at a YPO event, Young Presidents Organization. So there was about 60 of us there. He said he had all of us do this exercise. It's called writing your code, 12 lines. Every line begins with I will. He said it's a way to commit to a future. He said, I did my exercise. And the next day I started this company. The reason you all sitting here today is because I wrote my code, and every single one of you going to write your code as well. So I get all these amazing letters.
How does that make you feel when you hear all those stories?
It makes me feel so stoked because, you know, it came from a pure source.
Where did it come from?
It came from surfing. It came from Rincon. Rincon is having an environmental challenge. All the homeowners are connected up to septic tanks. When it rained, the water table would rise, the septics would overflow, the crap would flow out in the water. It would make surfers sick. So this friend of mine, Glenn Henning, who started Surfrider Foundation, said, Shaun, you know, I need your help solve this problem. He said, you were Surfrider Foundation's first ambassador ever. I was, 1984. He said, you wrote the first poster. I found a cool picture of myself doing a bottom turn, and I wrote the copy for their very first ad and poster. It was, do a good turn today. I mean, how simple are those? 5 words. And he said, well, I need your help again to solve this problem. Connect all the homeowners to the sewer line. I said, geez, that's a big problem, Glenn. He said, it's an $8 million problem. He said, but I have a $100 budget for you.
I love that.
Surfer style. Follow like
Totally.
surfer style. Like, how can you solve it? He said, I'm going to bring a group of kids down the beach, and I'm going to bring the media, and I'm going to bring, you know, the different officials out. $100 for you. Empower, inspire the kids. So I went and I wrote, what could I do? You know, I had my brand Solitude then. And we had a warehouse full of beautiful clothing. And I thought, no, I'm not going to give them kit. I'm going to do something from the spirit of surfing. And I wrote Surfer's Code, 12 lines. Every line begins with I will. 12 commitments. The values of surfing. What surfing teaches us about life. Courage, commitment, empathy. And I wrote it down on a little card, went down to the local printer, printed 100 cards, handed the cards out to the kids. Media loved the cards, turned into a groundswell. Ultimately, a whole lot of environmental groups got involved. We raised a bond and solved the problem. But these cards just took on a life of their own. But they came from surfing. So surfing's got great power. You know, today when I see surfing, you know, when we all grew up and were knocking on the door trying to create pro surfing, surfers were maligned. We were like outcasts, dopers, going nowhere. And today, everyone wants to be a surfer. Everyone up in Silicon Valley, they all want to be surfers. And, you know, I think that surfing's always going to have that edge, that kind of rebel edge, that like putting it on the line for just a dream. I mean, my whole life was revolved around that spinning cylinder. That was it for me, you know. And it was like, yeah, a lot of things mattered, but that was it. You know, there's that purity there. And it wasn't about like, I've got to be the winner. I've got to be the master of my own space, you know, that space in the tube. And when I think of that sort of beautiful attraction, you know, so, you know, when I grew up in South Africa, it was like a post-colonial country. You had New Zealand, Australia, Canada, South Africa. So our education system was very much based on the English system. You know, it was like at my primary school was like Eton and Harrow, and then I went on to like a Jewish school, and then university was very much like Oxford, Cambridge vibe, a bit of American influence. But anyway, so we used to read the English poets, and there's this amazing poem by this guy called W.B. Yeats, like legendary Irish guy. And this captures tube riding. This is a piece of it. It goes, a lonely impulse of delight drove to this tumult. I balanced all, brought all to mind. The words to come seemed waste of breath in balance with this life, this death. That razor's edge when you're riding inside the tube, especially at heavy waves like Backdoor, Sunset. You're right there, balanced on that razor, and that's what gives life the meaning, and that's what gets you into that flow state. So, so this awesome attraction of surfing, I always felt that you have surfing, and just a little tiny sliver of it is pro surfing. Mm. It's just that tiny sliver that's almost like being tacked on as an afterthought that enables us. You know, like a lot of people say, yeah, you guys started pro surfing because it was the only way that you could surf more.
Hallelujah,
and in a way it was. Hallelujah.
Amazing. Shaun, two things out of this last dialogue. One, if you're watching, you can probably hear, but you can definitely see it every time. For somebody that's so eloquent and well-spoken and clearly like this is your space, like you're such a communicator. But as soon as you go into any competitive discussion, I can see it, it's crystal clear in your eyes. Or when you go to like those levels of like super passion, or you're talking about barrel riding, like you see the other Shaun. Like I can see this level of like, it's not intensity, but it is like absolute belief and commitment and passion for this thing, whatever it is. It's crystal clear.
I'm telling you, Mark, you have nailed it. You know, the surf's code, 12 lines. Every line begins with I will. Everyone, when they write their code, 12 lines, every line begins with I will. I will is commitment. I will is absolute, unequivocal commitment. You're going to paddle over that 12-foot wedge at Pop on low tide. It's commitment is the basis of success in life. Commitment is not just the basis of success. Commitment is the basis of happiness in life. I will have faith. I will do what I say I will do. I will live a life of integrity. I will lift others up when they don't. These are lines that people write. You know, Surface Codes came out in 2006. I stopped publication of that book. Was about to be printed when I got the terrible news that I lost my beautiful son, Matthew. Played a dangerous game that he heard about at school called the choking game. All the kids were playing it with their school ties. They wore ties at school. And then I went, man, I've got to bring this book out. So it took a number of months, and eventually I published the book.
So you had already developed the code based on this request from Surfrider. And then when Matthew passed, you then were inspired to turn it into something.
Well, no, I had a book.
You already did.
Written the book, and the book was at the printer, about to be printed. And then my wife and I lost our boy. So I stopped the printing and went to South Africa for a number of months, because that's where Matthew was at school for one semester at my old school. So we stayed there for a while, then came back to the United States, and I thought, no, I've got to bring the book out, because the book's a beautiful, beautiful memory to Matthew. And so now the book's published, and the book becomes popular. It was actually so nice. The LA Times called it their favorite book of 2006. How about that? How cool is that?
Amazing.
It was wonderful to me, because the book was in memory of Matthew. Anyway, so now the book's become popular, and I'm sitting in the lineup. This is how, like I said, there are these connections beneath the surface in surfing. I'm sitting out in the lineup at Rincon. So Rincon is the reason the book came into being, because it started with Surface Code card to how am I going to help Rincon? So a guy paddles up to me, he said, hey, Shaun, I'm a headmaster, I'm a principal at a local school here in Santa Barbara. Smallest school in Santa Barbara. We only have 80 kids in the high school. Can you come and talk to our boys and girls? I went, sure. So I take the book down there, and I'm rapping to the kids, and I have an idea, and I go, Surface Code's my code, I wrote it. 12 lines, every line begins with I will, 15 minutes, 105 words. I said, what about all of you writing your codes? Giving you a homework assignment. I go to the headmaster, hey, Gordon. I said, cool, you guys know, go for it. So about a week later, I get the codes back from the kids, 80 kids, 12 lines, 960 lines of code. And the very, very first line of code is I will be myself, from a young girl. Her name was Elena Elsera. And then all the other amazing lines of code that these kids wrote. I'll have faith. I mean, you've got the book here. This is,
yeah.
So what I did is I took the best 12 lines from those kids, and I created a framework for a new book called The Code. And this book is a framework for positive decision making. And all the chapter titles are written from the students, with the very first one being, I will be myself. I will be myself. I will dream. I'll face my fears. I'll never give up. I will create. These are from kids. I will heal. I'll pray. I will give. I'll make a difference. I will imagine. I will have faith. I will share stories.
That's amazing.
How cool is that? So
I have to say something real quick, because I've done a lot of training, and I've spent a lot of time in like the Tony Robbins world. And a big part of what they do in those spaces is incantation. And I know that there's a lot of people that use incantation. I stare in the mirror every morning and I say, I will do this. I'm a great person. I believe in myself. And it's a big part of you. Say it, you say it, you say it, you say it, and you believe it. This is what you've asked these people to do, is create their own incantation, who they want to be, how they want to live, how they want to come across to the world. It's so powerful. And I just go back to this. You have this art of making things very simple. You said that the mantra that you came up for the surf rider, the very first one. What's that?
Do a good turn today.
Do a good turn today. Like, it's so simple. The code, 12 lines, 105
simple
words, like simple, but so powerful. Is that how your brain works? Or you just have a skill? Like, how
I tell you what, I like to simplify things. People say, So, like, it's an intractable problem. Israel, Palestine, Gaza, Hamas, Hezbollah. I said, I'll tell you what, how can you simplify it down to its essence, the problem and the solution? And I love acronyms. So for me, I call it the ARC pathway to peace. Okay.
The art?
The ARC.
Oh, the arc.
So first, acceptance. Man, you've got to have an acceptance. This is the state of Israel. It's been there for 3,500 years. It's not going to go away. Except there has to be acceptance. For Israelis, you've got to accept Palestine's going to be its own state. Just accept it. Then there has to be a spirit of reconciliation and respect. There has to be this respect. Respect that Israel's going to exist. Respect that Gaza is Palestine's going to exist. You've got to have that. You've got to have that that respect. And then you're going to have compromise. Those three things. There has to be compromise. South Africa, when it went through this terrible process of segregation, and ultimately when Nelson Mandela was elected in 1990 and they started a process of reconciliation, the country was so divided and became united relatively quickly. They had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So there are working models to create peaceful process. But without acceptance, there's nothing. And I love this concept of an ark too, because in every synagogue around the world, the ark contains the 5 books of Moses, the foundational testament of Judaism. And right above every single ark is a lamp. It's called Ner Tamid. It's the lamp of everlasting light. That lamp will never go out, which represents faith and that Judaism is never going to go anywhere. Jews are never going to, they're going to be there. But there has to be this acceptance. Mm. So I like to simplify, because broad, vast concepts are hard to understand. And people say, oh, Shaun, this is what you're writing in these books, they're so childish. They're not childish. They're childlike. Mm. Because when people write their code, it's childlike. There's a naivete that we lose in the rush forward on the hamster treadmill towards success. And sometimes you need to have this open mind. You need to have this fresh, innovative mind to think about new ideas. Like, I had an email, 2 days ago. Guy emails me. He said, Shaun, I've got to say that a year ago I was diagnosed with melanoma in my eye. He said, I found your book. I wrote my code. My life's never been better. I've moved. I'm living in a different place now. I've done, people use this little tool as like a recoding device. Psychologists call this an intervention. And for many people it is. Many people are stuck. I ask, like tonight I'm talking at the Newport Beach Library, the grand opening at the library, which is cool. They tell me it's sold out. There are 300 people. It's
small time for you these days.
No, but it's not. It's nice to hear that
you have a wide audience. It's not just surfers anymore. Right? So you're a long way from just catering to the surf world.
So right at the beginning of my discussions, and I started doing this in COVID, when COVID hit in February 20. My first client was a very big biotech company called Gilead Sciences, very famous. They had the only treatment for COVID at the time. So they were called Remdesivir. It was a very hot company. Anyway, I asked people, so this was live stream, a few thousand people. Text me a word that describes how you're feeling. I call it mind state. Just text me one word. We talk about simplicity here. People text me a word and it comes through on the screen as a word cloud. What a word cloud is, it's an agglomeration of words with the more frequent words are larger. So at a glance, you can see kind of the macro view of the audience sentiment, their mind state. And the big words were stress, anxiety, depression, disconnection. I called it a sad mind state, okay? And this has been a prevalent mind state for a number of years now. It hasn't really changed that much. Generally, it's about 67 to 70% negative. But the power of this little concept is people see the mind state, then they hear some stories. They hear 4 stories. They hear origin and development of the code. They hear a story about courage and commitment. They hear a story about perseverance and resilience. They hear a story about interpersonal connectivity, deep emotional interconnectivity, love. And then everyone writes code. 12 lines. Every line begins with, 12 minutes. And then people share the code. I do this super cool process. We share the code. It doesn't matter if you've got 2,000 people there. The code is shared. It's pretty cool. And then I go, okay, text me a word you're taking home with you. So in effect, what I've got, I don't say it, but what I have is mind state before, intervention, mind state after. The 2 words, generally it's overwhelming 100% positive, from 60 to 70% negative to 1. And the 2 principal words are hope and purpose.
Wow.
So that's what I do. Through the code, I help people find hope and purpose. So it's a beautiful thing to do. I'll tell you what, I rode some unbelievable waves during my career. But this wave is a better wave.
Chicken skin on that. That is incredible. When I was doing all my prep for this, Shaun, I came up, it started with the 3 Ps and I kept adding Ps, but I thought of you as passion, purpose, power.
Yeah.
And there's probably a couple other ones in there.
Those are the 3, and I talk about that. I use those 3, passion, purpose, power.
Oh, you do?
Because the power comes from purpose, and the passion is just that mojo that you've got to find inside yourself. Yeah, but purpose, what is purpose? Purpose is sort of this ethereal concept, but it's this committed intention to realize aims meaningful to yourself and others. So purpose is not just about self. Purpose is about community. It's about others. It's about uplifting and helping people. And through all these codes that I've read, people have written and sent to me, and I've watched come up on the screen.
Millions. It's got to be.
It's got to be. It's got to be over 1 million. The ultimate purpose of life can be identified in what people write. And this is what people write. They write 2 lines of code. They all like lines of code. But essentially, they only write 2 lines of code. One is, I'll be better. We have a genetic compulsion to be better. We want to be kind. We want to spend more time with our children. We want to be nicer to our wife. Want to be more successful. Want to spend more time with us. We just, we want to live a life of integrity. We want to be better. And then the other one, the other half is, I'll help others be better. Be a volunteer, a mentor, leader, teacher. So when I, after I lost my boy, Matthew, his name in Hebrew means gift from God, I had to refine my purpose, and I went down a different path. And I started to do these lectures to schools, universities, prisons, all sorts of large corporations. And I went, I have to learn more about this. So at 60, I went back to university. I did a Master of Science in Leadership to learn about influence and inspiration. So when I talk at these big events or at small events, I talk from a position of authority and education. I didn't just come up with there's hardcore research behind what I do. There's the work that I do and the studies that I show up there are important studies for the world. Studies on choice, studies on emotional contagion, studies on social media, how it's negatively impacting the world, and what I think are the remedies, how we can create a better world for everyone, how we can be better and we can help others be better too. So while it's like
Well, I think
it's so like to me, the way it's sort of developed and come together is been been very organic and authentic. It's been organic and authentic.
Got it. Well, listen, you have your master's in leadership and you have your PhD in surf and everything related.
Yeah, I'm going to take that. I'll take the PhD in tube riding. I'll take the PhD in tube riding.
Nobody would ever question that's impossible. You could teach that all day long just as well. Thank you for sharing all that. And I know there's the Genesis story that's so interesting, how everything in your life seems to be interwoven. Like when I do this, most people, it's pretty chronological how things occur. Yours is all interwoven. The fact that the code was already started, you lost Matthew, then that pushed it out further, and then it's continued. And meanwhile, you had instinct and solitude while you were a pro surfer, and that it's a really incredible path that's always going forward. But it's interesting where it's taken you, because you start with the Surfer's Code based on all the story, and now you have how many books do you have now, Shaun?
I've got I've done 5 books. So I did the first book was Surfer's Code, of course. Then I did a book based around this film I made, Busting Down the Door. I did like a big picture book of
we're going to talk about that for sure.
And then I did a cool, when Luke was born, I did a cool book of nursery rhymes. It was called Crazy Creatures Under My Surfboard, A to Z. And it was poetry, it was rhymes, that was really fun. And then I came out with the code, The Power of Our Will. And then I did The Surfer and the Sage, which was written during COVID to help people move from the darkness to the light. So that's a very spiritual book. Actually, I spoke to a guy yesterday, and a lot of people say, Shaun, we just leave the Surfer and the Sage on the side of our bed. Almost like the guy said, for me, it's my devotional. Pretty cool thing, because it's 18. 18 is a sacred number. Chai means life in Hebrew. So it has 18 chapters, and every chapter is a transition from the negative to the positive, from despair to hope, from powerlessness to empowered. And my collaborator was a very famous author and Jewish scholar, a guy called Noah Ben Shir. He's written millions of books. And then now it just released the 20th anniversary edition of Surfer's Code, written in a new chapter, and it's wonderful to have it out there in the world again for a whole new audience, for young people. And yes, it's young people, I think, look at reading a little bit differently, but it's on audio.
Yeah,
so they don't have to read, they can just listen to it on.
But even simply audio. The code and going through that process that you've now done with, I'm guessing, tens of thousands of people, and you've gotten all that code back, and it's really, it's so cool that you can develop something so powerful from the place that it came from that's easy. To do, and then you have this flywheel from there.
You know what I would like? I mean, if you had to say, Shaun, what your ultimate objective is, I would like every kid, twice to write their code. They write the code when they enter high school in grade 9, and they write the code when they enter university. 15 minutes. That's it. 12 lines. Every line begins with "I will." They write it, and then ideally they share it. So what we sometimes do, which is beautiful, is I'll go and talk to a whole school. So I have a program called Double Shaka. Every time I do a paid event, I do a free event. But I love to do free events for school, university, prison, rehab clinic, SEAL team. I've worked with SEAL teams, sports teams. So, I just, like when you do a school, so now you talk to a whole school, 2,500 kids. Then they go back to the classroom. Generally, it's about 20 kids in the classroom. They all write the code, 12 lines, every line begins with "I will." And then they stand up and they read the code. It takes about 45 seconds to read. So you've got 15 minutes, then you've got 45 seconds, you've got about 35 minutes, they read the code, and then each kid picks their favorite line, and it goes up on the blackboard. So you've got 20 lines of code that represents the culture of that classroom. and that stays up there on the blackboard. So you have this. A lot of organizations and corporations do it. I send them after I capture the data and I send them their best lines. So you have this representation of these positive, beautiful commitments, spiritual commitments that people have made. You know, when I do big corporations, no one ever writes, I'm going to hit my third quarter goal, or I'm going to be a billionaire. People, they look in deep, and psychologists call it finding your best self. People find the best version of themselves, and that's what they want to aspire towards. They want to be better, and they want to help others be better. It's so, like you say, it's so simple. It's so simple, and you've got to keep it, keep it simple and keep it authentic, keep it spiritual.
Could you have ever guessed that this is what you would be doing?
No way. I would never have. It's funny, the first time I ever spoke was when I was like 18 years old. I went to a high school in South Africa because I thought, I'm a champion now. I wanted to impart what I learned to kids. So it started super young, but I never really, during my career, very seldom, I was just...
Tunnel,
yeah.
Let me ask you this. You reflecting on yourself, looking in the mirror, what are you best at? Like on the world stage, speaker, entrepreneur, environmentalist, surfer.
Oh, that's I've never thought of it. I've never thought of it that way. I must say I love what I'm doing when I can engage and connect with people. I really do love it, and I love. I love, like, I've told my stories. And I see people writing their code. It's a beautiful thing to see. And there's this sort of atmosphere of stillness, this atmosphere of commitment, and this feeling that the emotional temperature is rising. You can almost feel this heat. Mm. It's a beautiful thing. So, I would say that I love sharing. I love sharing that mojo. I love sharing that mana. I love sharing that that spirit. And that connectivity, it's really profound between tribal cultures. Whether it's like the Jewish tribe, whether it's the Native American tribes. Like, I tell this beautiful story about my late son Matthew and I sitting on the beach around the sacred story circle, and we're sitting inside and telling each other stories, and we were inspired by this memorial that's right on the beach at Hammond's, my favorite break now, where right where I live in Montecito. And there's this beautiful inscription on this Shumash memorial that could have been written thousands of years ago. I don't know how recent it is. But anyway, it says, the sacredness of the land lies in the mind of its people. Mm-hmm. This land is dedicated to the spirit and memory of the ancestors and their children. This could have been written by a Jewish tribal elder. It could have been written by a Hawaiian kahuna. There's this children, ancestors, spirit, land. When I had this beautiful time with my son in Hawaii, and I told this story at this famous school in Hawaii called Kamehameha School. So Kamehameha School is dedicated to preserving and protecting Hawaiian heritage and culture. And after I spoke in their chapel, thousands of students, and the chaplain said, students, I want you to bow your heads, and I want you to give Shaun your mana. Mm. And they all went like this with their fingers. And tell you what, it felt like this wave of mana, pure positive spirit rolled across to me. It was beautiful. And he said to me, when you were speaking to your son inside the sacred story circle, you were speaking in spirit language. Now, you got the Hawaiian spirit mana, You've got the Shumash, the sacredness of the land lies in this, land is dedicated to the spirit. So this concept of spirit, it cuts across religions. Spirit and spirituality. It's such a beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, and I tell people, I'm hoping after my presentation that you felt my spirit, felt my mana, and I'm hoping that you can do the same.
No, there's no doubt about it. Let me ask you this, because it brings it back to kind of the question I asked before. I can only imagine how it feels to come out of, because I'll never experience it, I never did, like an incredible backdoor barrel as you surfed it, pumping, maybe even envisioning it like I have for all those years, the picture of you in the barrel behind Mark Richards, like that's just something that most humans will never experience firsthand. You did it all the time. You come out of a barrel like that, or whatever experience you have in the water that's like the pinnacle for you, which you have had many, 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 or coming off of a presentation from a podium in front of a group where you know that you really just made an incredible impact on a group of people. Is it a similar feeling that you get from both?
I'll tell you what, it is exactly the same feeling. And I'll tell you what, one of my most favorite movies or most favorite clips of me coming out of a deep, intense barrel at backdoor, I come flying out. I don't grab my crutch. I don't throw my hands in the... I'm looking at, and it's just a big smile. And that's when I do my presentation, that's the feeling. I get this feeling of warmth and a big smile. And even though, coming through that barrel, it's intense and it's exciting and it's like, but you come out with that smile of warmth and satisfaction that you've done something, you've achieved something. It's beautiful commonality there.
That's amazing. Well, I think of what you did in surfing is you inspired thousands, millions of people through your surfing. Inspired. But you're impacting thousands through your books and your keynote speeches. Those are different, right? Impact and inspiration.
Are they the same? Because I think that the fundamental role of a leader, and I believe great athletes are leaders, is to influence and inspire. That's it. Fundamental role of a leader, influence and inspire. That's it. It's really, really simple. And like, whoever the athlete is, whether it's Magic, Kareem, whether it's LeBron, whether it's Serena, whether it's Kelly Slater, these are community leaders, and the fundamental role, influence, inspire. I mean, look what's happening at the World Cup soccer, that Norwegian dude, and Messi.
I never knew who he was, and now he's my favorite guy.
Now, right? These guys are like just inspiring the whole world. And it's not because it's my team, just because they're cool guys, because they love what they're doing. And this, I think this love shows brightly through in their spirit.
Yeah. I guess my differentiator was most of us aren't going to be able to go out and do what Serena Williams or Kelly Slater or Shaun Tomson do at the peak of their sport, but we can be impacted by the code or by the books or the actions of the 12 lines.
Yeah, but you can also go on and influence and impact others. So you create this domino effect. And I like to say, like, the code, I just give out the framework. I maybe light a little spark, but the words are not mine. Like, I believe that, the words of great leaders, whoever they might be, Gandhi, Kennedy, Mandela, Churchill, these are words that inspire us, like you say. But the words that transform us, our own words. Our own words are the words that transform us. That's why I like, write your code, 12 lines, every line begins with how well. And if anyone's listening wants to do it, man, just go to my website, download the worksheet free.
Yeah.
Use it any way you want. It's open source code.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, listen, it's perfect timing to share and showcase. You've been recognized for so many things across the world and across your career. I'm just going to go through them because I think it shines a light on, it's not just a small sliver of people recognizing what you do. Like, you've really had incredible influence, impact because of your passion and your purpose. But we said 1977 World Surfing Champ. 1975 was your pipe championship. You're inducted to the Huntington Beach Surfing Hall of Fame, or the Walk of Fame in 1997, the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. Didn't know that one existed, but that's amazing. South African Sports Hall of Fame. You were the SEMA Environmentalist of the Year. We haven't talked a lot about your environmentalism, but it's a huge part of you. Surfrider Foundation Lifetime Achievement Award, Southern California Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. Again, I didn't know that one existed either, which is awesome. And then in 2024, you were recognized in like the top 100 remarkable Jewish South Africans. Like those are
I didn't know that.
all over the world, man. It's so incredibly cool. Passion and purpose, impact, influence, inspiration. Like it's so darn cool. Let's talk real quickly before we talk about instinct and why you're bringing it back in a real quick nutshell. And I've heard a couple comments you've said, I didn't grab my crotch when I came out of the barrel. I just smiled. I never fought back. I never argued about a score from a judge. Like your view of it is very sportsmanlike. How has surfing changed, whether pro surfing or how's it changed and how do you feel? Because I always think like if I had a magic wand, I'd put Shaun Tomson at the head of like the WSL because I think it would bring such an impact to the sport. Or you rabbit, any of these people that you grew up building it should be, I think, in the middle of ensuring its future has relevance and impact. How's been the evolution of surf and surf industry for you?
Yeah, I think Rabbit would be a great choice. He's a visionary, maybe not involved in operations, but certainly as like a president figure because he has so much credibility, he has so much intelligence, and he has this, I think, wonderful, authentic connection to surfing. So your surfing has evolved tremendously. I mean, since we started, I mean, there's this sort of large industry, professional surfers are making good money. The circuit is super well run. Amazing locations, which came from Rabbit's idea, best surfers and best locations, because my last year on the tour, I surfed in 28 events.
Oh my gosh.
And I would say most of them were just dreadful. They were dreadful surf. And, that was one of the reasons why I thought, I'm not going to be able to compete against a 17-year-old in 3-foot surf.
3 foot left with hockey.
So, there was a fundamental change. And I think that's one of the reasons why guys' careers are a lot longer. I mean, when you look at the top surfers of today, they're not young guys. They're all 28 to 32. These are not young guys. Gabriel Medina, Italo Ferreira, they're not young guys. I mean, you have a bit of a young crop coming up underneath it, but the dominant figures, certainly Yago Dora, I think. Geordie, I mean, Geordie's in his 34. Yeah, so yes, there's been this, I think, incredible evolution in speed, radical surfing, big waves, big tubes. Like everyone can ride the tube now. In my era, there weren't that many guys that were really great tube riders. Today, it seems like even a 13-year-old can pull into a massive tube at Neas and come out. The evolution of women's surfing has been incredible. The women are...
it's fun to watch. They're incredible.
It's fun to watch. And there was sort of this sort of barrier where, no, we're not going to send the girls out at Pipe. And then, we'll send the girls out at Pipe, and then they performed incredibly. They've really closed the performance gap. In my era, there was only 1 or 2 girls that were close in performance to the men. Margot Oberg was the one who, I mean, I'd surfed with her a few times, and she could have kicked my ass when it was like 3 to 4 feet. She was amazing. So today, the girls are just, their level's outstanding. The variety of surfboards, the new spots that have been discovered, the big wave explosion, Kyle Lenny on the foil. On
everything.
Laird Hamilton, developing the whole SUP thing, and then the massive waves that they rode. So there's been the surf pools, Kelly coming up with that first surf pool. So there's been these massive changes, but I'll tell you what hasn't changed. Well, a couple of things. One is that essential feeling of stoke hasn't changed. It's harder to get now with this like insane crowds. But the revolution in surfboard equipment hasn't changed. Like the basic outline and dimension of a board that the guys were riding in 1981 is not different in a revolutionary way. It's a refinement. Boards have become refined and refined and refined. So I went through a revolution from boards from 9 feet to 7 feet overnight in 1967. Then you had the pintails, then you had MR coming up with the twin fin, then you had Simon Anderson coming up with the thruster. These were massive design evolutions. So I think that in this age of AI, I think there's certainly going to be some massive design evolutions in fin design, fin placement, board construction. So I think there's a lot still to come. So the landscape looks very different, but that stoke hasn't changed. And the commitment that one needs in order to be successful hasn't changed.
You need to have that, what I see in your eyes whenever you get excited.
No, you got to, the guys have got to have that commitment. And then, you know, I look at I love watching the pro events, and I look at the surfers that have got that commitment. And I'll tell you what, this year, when I look at Gabriel Medina, I see that fire there. And also, you know, now Leonardo Fioravanti, he's the number one guy right now. And he sort of overachieved. No one ever thought that he would get to where he got, but he has that focus, he has that fire, there's a commitment, and it's great to see a guy manage to pull that off.
Well, as a serial mentor, like you're a professional mentor to thousands of people that you speak to. Today, most surfers are treating themselves like pro athletes. In your day, there weren't that many people. Like it was, people were not living a clean life or a professional athletic life in most terms. I think you always did. Kelly Slater always did. And it worked out real well. But coaching now, maybe back to the coaching and mentoring, like I always say it to my kids and everything else, show me a world-class athlete, they have a coach. Show me a world-class businessman, they have a coach. How important to you is that in success for anybody, having a mentor or a coach in your pocket?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, the coaches in surfing seem to be guys that are former pro surfers. But in terms, did they go and do a sports psychology degree? Did they go and study? Did they get educated? Or is it just like, well, it kind of worked for me, and maybe me just being here is giving you the confidence, or, you know, you bust your board, I'll paddle out with a new board. I'm not sure of how integrated with science, with sports science, the coaches are. This I don't know. But I think the coaches that are certainly there useful in terms of being confidence builders, in terms of creating an overall strategic plan, I don't know. But there's a couple of things that if I was a coach and I would tell guys this: never, ever consider a double pump turn, ever. Yeah. And some of the best surfers in the world wondering why they have only won 2 events when people think they should have won 22, cut the double pump turn. So that's automatically cutting your power in half. So there's a lot of
from
surfers,
a world champion.
Yeah, there's a lot of surfers out there. Stop the double pump turn, and I'll tell you what, you can double your competitive success. Don't ever contemplate a grab rail cutback. It's the world's, I don't know why guys do it. It looks, so not only does it look terrible, but it's absolutely a contrivance. It's not art, it's artifice. It's like, look at me, I'm grabbing it. So
Shaun,
keep your hands off the rail.
This is so funny. I just have to say, one of my questions was, are you still a surf frother? Are you still as passionate about surfing as ever? I think you just answered it.
No, I love surfing. I love watching the events. And then, you know, often I'll speak to like young surf teams and I'll go, this is how world titles are won. Simple. This is the mantra. Hard off the bottom, hard off the top. Hard off the bottom, hard off the top. That's how simple it is. Everything else, tube, cuddy, aerial, but every single world title has been won that way since 1976. You can even go back earlier. Hard off the bottom, hard off the top. You get that mantra, it builds confidence, builds commitment, builds flow, builds rhythm, builds continuity. And yes, sometimes you got to surfing chopu, steep barrels. It's not hard off the bottom, hard off the top. But that is the mantra of flow.
Who's the best at it?
I'll tell you what, it's Medina's got it, John's got it, Kelly's got it, even though, Kelly's
Sure.
not at the coalface anymore. Ethan Ewing
I was going to
has
ask
got
you,
it. He's getting it.
did you watch Stab in the Dark with Ethan?
Yeah.
Oh my! We're so nerding out on surf right now. But I'm with a world champion.
He's a
But
great. He's
the Stab in the Dark with
and he's
Ethan
a great guy.
in
too.
2026 is just unbelievable
His mom,
surfing to me.
his mom won bells.
Yeah,
I mean, how
it's
classic.
incredible.
He just seems like a great kid. I won 19 majors in my career, 19 major pros. Some of those are even before the ASPWSL RPS era. But hard off the bottom, hard off the top, and that's how
Simple.
he surfs.
I love your simplicity.
That's how he surfs, and I love the dude's flow, hard off the bottom, hard off the top.
There's incredible surfers out there that I don't need to watch very often, but good surfing, beautiful surfing. You're surfing at your peak in barrels of consequence. It's magic to watch that. And for most of us that'll never surf that way, never did. And again, you graced our walls, and we're grateful for that. Shaun, I am so impressed. It's so cool what you've done. And I know it wasn't like, I think there's a message there. Like, just, you never know what tomorrow holds. Do the work, have that level of purpose and
say
passion.
yes as well. A lot of a lot of management theory books say no because you've got only limited time. For me, the best things that have happened to me have been when I have said yes. Oh, Shaun, do you want to be involved in the Surf Rider Foundation? Sure, and that led me to Shaun, I need your help for ring card. No, I'm too busy. No, okay, I'll write Surfers Code card. It's like when you say yes, I think it just expands your horizon and who knows where that opportunity is going to go? Who knows where that ride is going to take you? So saying yes, very important.
Well, thank you for saying yes, for being here. I really, really appreciate it. Shaun, what's keeping you fired up these days? Like, what are you passionate about? Obviously the speaking and writing. What else you got going that keeps you passionately?
So I restarted Instinct. And the brand that I started in 1979, I sold it when I retired from the tour in 90. So we had a good run there, like 10, 11 years. It went out of business after I sold it, in about 92, 93, disappeared from the market. It didn't go like through the Kmart, Walmart, Target. It just disappeared from the market. So I bought it back a number of years ago. And then when I saw the implosion in the industry, when Quicksilver, Billabong, Vulcan, Maruka, all of them went bankrupt and ultimately were acquired by a private equity group, a licensing group in New York City, I went, wow, maybe there's a way to come back with a small, credible, authentic brand that's built on values, that's built on the values of the Surfers Code, and that is the world's first social purpose brand.
Yeah, I love it.
With a vision to bring people together through the code and through the cool product, and really reach out to young people through my talks, and organically connect them to Instinct, and for them to know that a portion of every sales goes towards my outreach to the community, whether it's jails or whether it's schools or universities or sports teams. So a lot of we have about 140 accounts now around the nation, and a lot of shops are really stoked about this because it's kind of a new way to envision a surf brand. Because a lot of the brands went bankrupt because they, I think, lost the connection to the core. Maybe they got too greedy. Maybe they just got too businessy, and maybe they moved too far away from the beach. So I hooked up with a great guy, my partner down in Carlsbad. That's where the company's based now, and we've got a printing facility down there and our distribution center. And it's like grassroots, and I go around to the shops.
Wow.
And hand out tea, sometimes even show the line. We've got an appointment to be showing the line to this great store, Hobie, on Monday with my wife. And we've got a small team, great designer, guy called Troy Kingman, wonderful guy. And it's great to see the support. But I'll tell you what's surprising is some stores, no, I don't even want to look. I don't even want to look. Or I had one guy, famous shop up on the coastal shop on the Central Coast, at a trade show. Now I'm standing outside there. I'm there to show that this is
Legit. It's on.
This is legit. This is not. I'm not a licensee here. Someone's paying me a paycheck, and I said, "Hey, you want to check the line? You've got 8.5 minutes." 8.5. I felt like decking the guy. I mean, I'm going like, "Where's your respect, pal? I helped build this business. I helped build pro surfing. Didn't build it myself. I helped. I was part of it, and just crass lack of respect." So people say, "Oh, the brodom, the brodom, the brodom." The brodom is there, but it's not everywhere. And I just have to accept that some stores are just on a different path. That the one store said to me, I said, I saw this. Does it bother you that these brands that you're selling are in JCPenney's, are in Costco, they're in Target, and as long as it sells. So you do have, with a certain crew of retailers, and as long as it sells mentality. Other retailers go, "Wow, this is cool, this is authentic, it's different. It speaks to a new customer in a different way." And that's all you want to do. You want to be a bit different. You want to have your own voice. But sometimes, as a competitor, I'm going, "Can you believe it? You're not, no, I don't want to look," or "You've got 8.5 minutes," or "As long as it sells." I'm going, this is the antithesis of the spirit, the true spirit of surfing.
Well, it's interesting. You can tell me offline which stores not to shop at and which ones to shop at based on how they engage with you. Shaun, this has been so incredibly cool, and I'm so grateful. If people want to find out more about your books, about you, your where you speak, or how to get in touch with you, where do you direct them?
So you got my website, ShaunTomson.com. There's tons of info there. Then for Instinct, it's you just go to instinctsurf.com. You can we've got a beautiful website up there with a lot of information, and then I'm very active on social media. I'm very, very active. So I encourage you, and I post 3 or 4 times a week. There's a lot of positive in this divided, turbulent, broken world. I'm trying to do my best to send out positivity and positive messages. So LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, I'm on there regularly. I love to communicate with people. People send me something, I send it back. And I'm hoping that people go to my website and download this code worksheet and share it with your family. It's the greatest thing when mom and dad and the kids sit around the table. In 15 minutes, they write their 12 lines, and then they read it to each other and they put it up on the fridge. It's just a wonderful way of connecting with each other in this broken, divided, turbulent world. We have to create these bridges, and not just between others, between the family too. Create the bridge in the family. So, thanks for the great work that you've been doing, and it's been wonderful to go to those 2 fundraisers, and it's cool.
Awesome. Shaun Tomson, thank you for being an icon and everything you do. This has been awesome. I so appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.